What's splashing? Welcome to season 9, episode 8, the finale of Siren Sundays with me, your host, Lashanti the Siren. And today's guest is Melissa Ingraham, our current Miss Bahamas Universe. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Lashanti. Thanks so much for having me.
And welcome back to the show. As we saw before, you have actually been on the show 2 times before this.
I have, and I love being here. So it's always wonderful to join once again.
Definitely. And we love having you. And I know you've introduced yourself before, but some things have changed since then. You're hotter by 1 degree. Let's hear about what your educational background is.
So my name is Melissa Ingraham. I am the Miss Universe Bahamas 2023. I recently moved home with my master's degree in climate change, and so I'm very excited about that. So I have an undergrad degree in environmental science now with the climate change masters, and I'm just hoping to really contribute to what we're doing here in the Bahamas as it relates to the environmental activities and efforts towards climate action.
What made you choose to study climate change in your graduate degree?
So, studying environmental science and just being exposed to both the marine and terrestrial environments growing up, as well as throughout my, undergrad degree, as well as just throughout the career that I started to establish after the fact, there's a lot of things that you notice and observe that are attributed to climate change. A lot of different issues that we're seeing in a negative capacity that are affecting our oceans, affecting our forests, affecting our soil and just groundwater table. There's so many different issues that we're having. And climate change being the main factor that connects between all of them is something that I thought to really jump into at a educational level so that I have more experience into how we can find solutions to try and just tackle the issues.
Awesome. What was one of your favorite experiences off in Ireland for your masters?
Ireland was a very cold, wet, and rainy place, but it's very fun as well. I think the most memorable thing to me is, I guess, the kind of rural side of Ireland. So there are lots of open land areas, just lots of greenery, lots of sheep and horses and cows. And I thought that was really cool. They grow a lot of their own local produce. And so a lot of things are not like GMO. And that means that they kind of go bad very fast. They expire very fast. But having the experience of like supporting local farmers and what local produce is like and cooking with them and just getting used to that whole kind of atmosphere, it was, I would say, a once in a lifetime experience for me because, of course, in the Bahamas, we import a lot of things that are preserved to last longer. And so I really enjoyed that aspect of it.
One of the things I learned that I had no idea was a thing when I studied abroad on across the pond is because we import so much things that actually increases our carbon footprint in comparison to countries, like that have their own produce and grow their own livestock and things like that. So I would love one day to see us as a country find ways to import less. But I know one of the things that obviously we're highlighting here on the episode is the fact that you have this platform for climate action. So can you tell us first of all, what is a platform? What does it mean to say that your platform?
So to me, having a platform is basically identifying what you like to advocate for. And to me, advocating for climate change, the environment, conservation, biodiversity preservation, all of those things collectively are very important to me in terms of having something strong to highlight and raise awareness surrounding whatever issues, I guess, are involved with them. And so with me, as I went off to the international pageant, actually starting at the local pageant here in the Bahamas, my platform was One Planet, One Chance, Stop Climate Change. And it was a very, I guess, generic slogan that I was able to find that I thought just really put the point out there that climate change is urgent and we need to find ways to stop it or at least try to slow it down. And I moved into mitigating climate change when I went away for the international pageant. And collectively, this is just trying to raise awareness, like I said, bring education and awareness to the forefront about the impacts of climate change. We are in a crisis. Literally, we are seeing the loss of our forests, the loss of coral reefs. We're seeing increased wildfires and droughts and all of these extreme weather events. And we need to do our efforts and our part in trying to reduce the carbon emissions that are currently going into the atmosphere or that are existing in the atmosphere. We must try to figure out ways that we can build resilience. And then we also need to figure out ways to establish funding mechanisms so that we can support those countries and communities that are very vulnerable to what's happening from climate change. And so that's my platform that I'm advocating for, ways that we need to take climate action and why it's urgent to do it now.
Yeah, and I think you're so right, especially because the Bahamas is one of those countries, as well as some of our neighbors in the region. So, what are some of the activities or even the travel that you've been able to do so far to advocate for this climate action?
So I started with the Bahamas 100,000 tree planting initiative. It's something that I love to speak about because one, it was something that I wasn't sure we would be able to accomplish, but we were able to put a plan of action together that really set us on a pathway to definitely achieve the goal. And also, it wouldn't have been possible without all of the various partners that we had. We worked with a lot of partners and stakeholders, organizations, not just here in New Providence, but across the total of 8 islands. And, I think in the Bahamas, when it comes to unity, we have that power to really come together when we need to. And it was very exciting just to see Bahamians be so excited about the environment and planting trees. And even after the initiative ended, oh, can I have another tree? Like, I want to do this planting activity or I want to add more stuff to my backyard. And that was the whole goal, provoking the, I guess, just thought process behind like as simple as planting a tree, you can contribute to taking climate action or contribute to removing carbon out of the atmosphere. And we did a Saunders Beach planting activity. I know that there was some setbacks when I went off to Ireland with some of the removal aspect of it, but we were able to get that under control. We are working on having a lesson learned kind of aspect where we bring different organizations together and we really explain how coastal resilience and reestablishing the healthy dune systems and planting native Bahamian plants to really stabilize the beach is important. And I'm hoping that with my team, The Sustainable Lifestyle, as of January, we are able to get something off of the ground so that we can continue in that direction, starting with Saunders Beach, but then identifying new target locations for coastal resilience efforts.
And I know you mentioned the word removal. So, can you talk a bit about that and specifying how it's the removal of invasive species to then go and replant native? Like, what kind of process is that?
So in the Bahamas, we have a lot of threats by invasive species. You have casarinas, you have Brazilian pepper, and then you have scabola. And they can technically grow anywhere, but in terms of along the shoreline, they compete with the native Bahamian plants. They are fast growing. Some of them, specifically casarina, they have like a toxin in the leaves that prevents the native plants from growing. And they don't necessarily have the capacity to stabilize the dune as they should, as the native plants do. And so, with them kind of competing and removing our native plants, then we see the issues of coastal erosion, where the higher wave energy from just surges or storms as they come in, you have the sand being removed, and you see maybe the trees falling over or just their roots still there, but the sand isn't. And so removing the invasive species to make way for the native plants and upholding a level of maintenance to these areas so that we can keep a level of control of those invasive species is something that's very important. And that's something that we began to do at Saunders Beach. And so what we need to do again is get back out there so we have the level of control and the maintenance on the invasives that are starting to reestablish so that we ensure that we preserve the health of the ecosystem, especially with the natives that we did put down.
And I'm all here for that. And as I've said a few times on this show, and to people who just know me, I have a personal vendetta against Casarina, the Australian pine tree that ruined my ankle. So I definitely understand the need to get rid of them. And I know Saunders Beach, we actually had Shanique from TNC on the show a while back talking about the project that she did where Saunders Beach was such a popular beach and it had all those casarina just lined off. And there were so many people that were actually upset about this removal project. And so it's so exciting to see that you're continuing some good work in that area to reestablish the native trees and to just bring back that dune system. I think people are now grateful that the sand is coming back and the beach looks more like a beach rather than a rocky shore, or more like a sandy beach rather than a rocky shore beach. But I am interested to hear about some of the other things that you've been doing, like mangrove. You've been doing some mangrove plantings as well?
So the last big tree planting activity that we did was mangrove planting. I actually worked with a young lady out of Colorado. Her name is Margot Dempsey, and she was working towards her Eagle Scout project. So that was very fun. She reached out to see if we can try to assist her in planting some trees. It was actually done on her 16th birthday. I was like, it's spring break, you're turning 16, and you come to the Bahamas to try and support us in climate change efforts. Like, that's amazing. I love that.
I love it.
So we worked with the Bahamas National Trust at Bonefish National Pond, and we got about 136 mangroves planted out there, which was a very fun activity. And we also did work at the New Providence Ecology Park. We
Nice.
planted about 30 native Bahamian trees as well. And it was a very just, I guess, proving to be a positive like change because, the ecology park, or what we formerly knew it as the dump, we always had those like wildfires, and you always smell it, and people would associate the dump with like, ew, like I don't want to go that way. But they have done such a great job at just cleaning the entire like, I guess, land area, but also sorting the waste and just making it not a hazard anymore, to the point that you can have a tour and you can see like this is how waste management like should be. And contributing to that ecology park aspect of it, trying to greenify it, is such a blessing, I think. And I'm so happy to have worked with a young female who wants to be empowered in not just supporting the environment, but supporting international environments, especially our home, the Bahamas.
That's exciting. And I know we do have a question from the audience. And this comes from, yeah, I know, right? This comes from the Eric Carey. Melissa, do you feel the international rhetoric our politicians are advancing is being matched with the local and national action?
Hi, Mr. Carey. Thank you for that question. Um, I would say that, so I love this question because I always consider climate action and environmental activities in two different pillars. And so having the international side as well as the government side, I call them the top down approach. And then having like the community and like organization level of being very hands on, I call it the bottom up approach. And I think both of us are targeting two different things that are important. And so once we have like an aspect that, yes, from a policy level and from a global level, our country is being heard and is being seen, and we're trying to make a push, and just you have to hear our voice, like we need this, we need the support, we need the help. But then once you also have the level of action taking place from the bottom up approach, that this is actually also important. Like, no, we need to make sure that our kunks are preserved, and we need to make sure that we have a season that's introduced here, but we also need to make sure that our beaches are reinforced. Once you have the two of them kind of meeting somewhere in the middle over time, I think that's as positive of a, I guess, effort as possible that we could even hope to achieve. I do feel like from the top down approach, more support could be given to the bottom level, where more action is actually facilitated, more funds are pushed into ensuring that we have reinforcement. We need to build resilience. Like, we know what's coming in the next 20 to 30 years. We see what's been happening just in the past 2 to 3 years and how fast the change has happened. And so I think just coming to the mutual agreement that, yes, we need to support them at the policy level, they need to support us at the action level, but the two different sides are still very compelling. And especially as they somehow merge together over time, it's definitely something important.
I love that you explained that so well. And that almost starts to answer my next question about your vision for climate action in the Bahamas. And that's pretty much it. I'm not sure if you'd have more to add, but it is so important that you have people working from all sides of the problem to get into the middle where that solution really is. Because just how we like to talk about interdisciplinary approach, it is this like interagency, interdisciplinary, just like different approaches that we need to all be taking. So kind of get in where you fit in to start working towards these solutions for climate action, which is super exciting. And I'm super excited to hear that you have more things coming. So do you have anything else to add? Like, what other sorts of things do you have as far as your vision for climate action in the Bahamas?
Well, so I would say that climate action, I like to refer to the Sustainable Development Goals. I feel like the Sustainable Development Goals collectively are something that helps us to push towards having 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2030, or that's the aim. collectively you need to meet all of the SDGs.
Mm-hmm.
And that really shows how climate change is a cross-sectoral issue. And so it's not just a scientist preaching like, oh, we need to put like some kind of support towards the coral reefs that are dying, and like the wildfires, like just wildfires happen. Like there is scientific evidence that shows us that yes, climate change might be a natural cycle that persons like to try and like, you know, put an argument towards, which is true. But we as humans have contributed largely with the increase of the natural cycle of carbon in the atmosphere that has now propelled that natural cycle outside of where it should be. And so we have no level of prediction as to when it's going to kind of retreat and go back to where it should be. So all we know is we can make predictions as to how bad things can be, and we don't know when it's going to kind of retain itself. And that's why we need to ensure that we're putting efforts towards not just the science, but also towards the economy, the social standing, and any kind of aspect that includes industries globally. Like we won't have a world without a healthy environment. And so it definitely affects everyone, gender, age, there's no bias.
Yeah.
But what I would say that I am interested in as it relates to climate change and climate action is the Bahamas definitely being a leading voice in what's happening. And I definitely commend the current Prime Minister, Mr. Davis, for his efforts in leading the climate change charge and getting all of the Caribbean leaders together so that they can have a very strong regional voice going into big meetings like COP, which is actually starting this week, and
Mm.
ensuring that we have definitely some kind of force to reckon with as a country. But even with that being said, once we're a leading voice, now we can make our own really big steps as a country to say, like, this is what we're doing. This is something that we're seeing positive results from. And we
Mhm.
are going to have a knowledge exchange where we work with our other Caribbean and Latin American countries so that we can tell them these things work and we can support them as well.
I love it. It's the true beauty and brains here, guys, people. Like, I love it. We do have two more questions in the audience that I want to tackle. And I'll start off with Dr. Anselina Davis. Melissa, how do you feel your message was received by your fellow contestants versus family and friends at home? Very interesting question.
That is an interesting question. Hello, Dr. Davis. Um, So I would say that I felt like I had like 50-50, like the same level of reception to the message. So a lot of persons in the Bahamas, they were very supportive to the beauty and brains claim, which I appreciate so much. And what I would say with that is, I guess a lot of persons in some ways, they think, at least from my opinion, a lot of persons see climate change and environmentalism as a very rare occurrence in the Bahamian society for some reason. And I'm like, oh, there's actually a community of us. But but it's still reassuring nonetheless that persons are interested in what I have to say, and they think like, oh, we need people like you because we do see the changes that are happening in our country. Like we don't want to see it getting worse. So do what you can and definitely spread awareness and education on this and try to help us out because we're trying to. And from the international level with the fellow contestants of my pageant sisters, I have learned throughout this journey that pageantry is a lot more than just being pretty and walking on the stage and, just what's at the surface level. Because a lot of the girls came in very strongly with their platforms that they're advocating for. And there were actually about 3 other girls who had, I guess, climate related like backgrounds. But there were also some persons who were like scientists in the robotics kind of area. There were lawyers, there were doctors, there were all of these different like platforms coming out of the ground, basically just blooming on this worldwide stage, just trying to advocate for something more than just being a pretty girl on the stage. And
Mm-hmm.
I really resonated with that because we were all able to just kind of like share our experiences and like, this is why it's important for my cause to be heard, and we heard each other, which then kind of helped us to help each other to shine. So like just sharing each other's posts or like going on live streams together and like, hey, this is my friend from Jamaica and she's like a medical doctor. There are different things like that. And it was really empowering to be amongst this whole group of intelligent women.
Mm-hmm. I love that. It feels good to know that, to your point, it's more than just what's on the surface. And I think a lot of times when people see beautiful women, and I won't run down this on this trajectory, but it's so important to know that there's more than to a person than what meets the eye. That's what I'm trying to get at. And
Yeah.
it's so nice to hear. And from even when I watched, because I definitely tuned in to support you, I was very amazed at some of the platforms that people were representing. And it's so nice that you've been able to connect to now this global network of women who are also pushing forward and pushing and advocating for some of the things that they believe in, which is so inspiring to women everywhere, but to people everywhere. But we do have another question from Mr. Carey. Melissa, now that we've surpassed the 1.5 to stay alive threshold, what should vulnerable countries like the Bahamas be pushing for? With this significant negative threshold surpassed, is there really hope for countries like ours? That's a deep question.
Hi again, Mr. Carey. Thanks for the question. So, and when I went off to my degree in Ireland, this
Mm-hmm.
was a consistent topic that came up in class because we were like, well, we're currently at 1.1 and you see what's happening. Why are we aiming for 1.5, right? And
Right.
so with us now just at a pathway of going past 1.5, like for me, it's like, what kind of hope do we have? But then also on the other spectrum of that, I want to live in the Bahamas. Like I grew up in a beautiful place. Like I would love to have a family here and like to have grandkids and all of that here. But that's something that at our current trajectory, we just may not be too blessed to have. But that's why the platform that I chose to really bring awareness to is climate change and climate action and the urgency behind climate action. Because having sustainability as well as at the forefront of that, like what we currently have, we need to preserve it for the future generations. And
Right.
that includes me at the later stages of my age and my life, as well as those who come after me. And I always relate to the story. My dad used to talk about all of these fruit trees. He could just like walk alongside of the road and he'll like grab a breadfruit, grab some scarlet plum. And that's something that's just not too frequent anymore. Even me, when I used to scuba dive, like used to see these vibrant coral reefs everywhere. And now just a lot of bleaching, a lot of dead corals covered in algae. And trying to take really excessive steps, I think we need to do it like right now. I think there's still hope. And that's one thing. Like, I don't know if I'm too hopeful, but for us to stay here, like, you have to have someone who, yes, there's going to be a backup plan, consider where we're going to migrate to and how can we facilitate like population, like transfer.
Yeah.
Like, like that's definitely a backup plan. But the first plan of action should be how can we really take like strong climate efforts right now to build resilience. And we like to plan for, well, if we have like a hurricane that's a category 5, maybe we should just like increase the building code and that's that. But like if you think about, I guess, I don't know, like if you think about like all of the different aspects towards like building resilience at once, like not just on one island, but the Bahamas is a whole network of islands, like it's an
Yeah.
archipelago. Like consider how you could do like a national kind of approach that might be beneficial in supporting like based on hurricane trajectory in the past, like this is what we kind of notice. And if we target certain islands to be built up in these kind of ways, if we
Mhm.
might like convert certain sand flats into mangrove habitats instead, like certain things that, yes, while they might be unconventional or like out of the box, that's what we need right now. Like if we're gonna have a shot, especially as a small island developing state that's low lying and that's already been facing the brunt of this.
And the low lying, right? That's, I think, such the scariest part of all of this. There are so many other countries in the world that are not as low lying as we are, and it's a real fear for people who may not be able to migrate, because climate migration is coming if it's not already started. And we're not even going to go down that road, but
Yeah.
as Bahamians, just a simple thought of like, there are just people who can't swim, and so the thought that one day we're going to be underwater, it really creates this like fear in people. And so I'm glad that there's still hope. And I love your ideas. I think being innovative is the only way to find solutions, because we can't just keep doing the things that we think are working when we're really not seeing progress. We have to be innovative. We have to be thinking out of the box. We have to try anything, because that's where, true solutions come in. And we are getting more questions in the chat, which is great. So we have another question from Misha. Or not another question. We have a question from Misha. If there was one policy change you could make happen immediately in the Bahamas to positively affect climate change, what would it be? These are some good questions today.
Boy, hi, Misha. Oh, that's a tough question. I'm not sure. One policy change? Lashanti, what do you think about that one?
I definitely feel like we should really double down on the plastic ban. I know that's been something that, as we had COVID, it seemed that we kind of forgot that it existed. But I think looking for more ways to reduce and reuse can be a thing because, our ecology park, the New Providence Ecology Park is amazing, but, it's better to create less waste than to find better ways to get rid of waste or, that's the first thing that comes to mind. That's actually a really good question, though.
I feel like marine protected areas, like enhancing the management and like effectiveness of them, because they should also, I think, include the coastal
Hmm.
marine is coastal and marine, like deep.
Hmm.
So like the dune stabilizations, like I mentioned, and like even outplanting of corals or whatever kind of protections on seagrass, like all of those kind of come under the management effectiveness. And I don't know, doubling down, like ensuring more funds are there to support, ensuring the capacity of staff, etc., towards MPAs. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one, definitely. Because I think it's one of those things where if you get people who live near these MPAs, if they feel more ownership for these areas, then they're more likely to want to come out and help support efforts. So where there may be a day where they need to, replant these mangroves or replant some sea oats to build up the dune system, you have the manpower behind you because those are things that need to happen in one go. Whereas managing and monitoring over time requires less people. I think community buy-in is so important, and those are types of policies and changes that would definitely help that. So
Yeah.
great answer. Another question from Renique. She says, "Hi, Melissa. Having gone through with the Miss Bahamas process, the Miss Universe process, what would be two platforms you think other ladies should focus on in the future?"
Hmm. Hi, Renique. Thanks for the question. That's an interesting one. I would say because the Miss Universe platform is just like a way to amplify your message. Like, for instance, with me, because I speak climate change and environmentalism, I can speak on Siren Sundays. I can speak in the Beings group chat. I can speak to like different environmental offerings or like opportunities that I have in country, but having a different kind of platform or audience space that is not familiar with what I am trying to communicate. And in this instance, I would say like pageantry might focus more on like, okay, that girl, like she could walk, like she could talk and she could give a good answer. And yeah, she's beautiful. But when they hear about what you have to speak about, it's really and truly what you have to bring to the table and how you communicate it. And so there's no real like suggestion from me as to what I think people should focus on in the future. But if it's something like near and dear to your heart and you're willing to put in like the hard work towards getting to where you're at and the message is that important to you, then just go for it. But climate change, climate action, that don't hurt.
Those two don't hurt, right?
It don't hurt.
I think that's important. I think just being an authentic person, and if you were to compete in something like a pageant that I've never done, I just imagine that being able to answer questions and speak passionately on something shows through a bit more when it's something you're actually interested in versus this is a good cause, so you're going to try and speak to this. So I think your advice is great. I think anyone interested on doing this and picking a platform, pick something that's genuinely a cause close to your heart. So that's a good
Definitely.
answer. Today, I'm interested in what is next for Melissa Ingraham. I know you briefly mentioned as of January 2024, the Sustainable Lifestyle Group is going to start doing some things, but what do you do? What does Melissa do on a regular basis?
So besides moving home from my master's degree, besides the pageantry life that's very new and I'm so excited to have ventured into this journey, I also started working at the Office of the Prime Minister as a climate change officer and advisor. So I'm with the Climate Change Environmental and Climate Change Advisory Unit. And so that has been a super great experience. I started in September, and the team there is just, I would say, supportive of my, I guess, journey into pageantry so that I can try to highlight the work that I love, but also the work that they do, as well as the Bahamian community, the Bahamian scientific community, and what we've been trying to raise awareness on and really attack and like get hands on with. but at the international level, and having more voices to be heard, basically from this one obstacle of mine that I've taken on. And I don't know. I would say with that job, it's also given me a level of insight into like the policy side, because I've always been very hands-on. Like, I've been the person growing trees and digging up seedlings, and we're gonna do this activity and that activity, or we're gonna lead this effort. And now taking more of a backseat in that role, and maybe putting that more to like the hobby side, because I'm still growing trees. Um, but
Great.
so yes, talk to you about that. But taking more of a backseat role on being hands on, and now getting more into like revision of documents and revision of like policies and regulations, and ensuring that when these big international conferences or meetings pop up, that the Bahamas has a seat at the table, the Bahamas has a voice to be heard, and we're ensuring that some kind of direction or path that's in our best interest as it relates to climate change and the environment and the overall sustainability and preservation of our Bahamas is met. And I just love having the opportunity to say that I can contribute to something like that. And again, with the sustainable lifestyle, while it's still a work in progress, we definitely hope to have that hands-on kind of level back on the ground starting in January. And so stay tuned for that. Follow Sustain Your Belly on Instagram or on Facebook to learn more, and when any announcements come out. But I am just overall very excited to see the Bahamas become more resilient, because this is a place that I want to live. This is a place that I want my friends and my family to have the opportunity to live in as well. And I don't want to see any of us as residents or visitors or tourists, any of that. I don't want to see us pushed out of the country that we were born and raised in, or that we grew to love in any capacity. And so just ensuring that whatever level of climate action is taken, it's something that is suitable. And when it's not, it's something that I can stand up and speak to, because what I will do is call out what is wrong and stand up for what is right, and definitely make sure that the voice that is not being heard is heard.
I love that. It's always important, and I love that you shout out your group. And I want to just let everyone know I did put that Instagram link in the chat, so please look at the comment section and check out that page. Definitely follow if you do want to get involved with some of the work they're doing. And I know you briefly mentioned that you're planting trees, but before we get on to that, I do want to honor the one more question from the comments, and then we'll move on to what you're doing with the trees. Dr. Davis asked, Melissa, the pageant is often talked about as a scholarship opportunity. What would you fund a young Bahamian to do if you had a scholarship fund of your own? I feel like I know the answer, but
plant trees. So I have really grown into this concept of STEAM. So STEM, but with art included. I feel like science and art is very well intertwined. And so I think anything surrounding the STEAM concept that definitely relates to, I guess, climate change efforts is something that I would be willing to fund, like as a scholarship opportunity. That's actually a great idea. I love it.
I love that too. And I totally agree with you. I think art is another way to communicate, right? Like someone once told me, artists give their meaning to their art through what's happening with society, and sometimes they're conveying this message. And I think, unfortunately, from my perspective, and you can correct me if you've seen something different, I don't think that the conservation and environmental sector, or even just climate change action individuals in general, are using art enough. And I've seen a few things kind of start popping up, but locally, I would love to see more artists kind of convey different messages about climate change in their art, whether it be a drawing, a painting, or some sort of still imagery. And yeah, so that's actually, we can talk about that. But right now we're going to talk about, so you're still planting trees. We're looking out for January for the Sustain Your Belly crew. What is going to be happening? Can you give us some sort of preview and insight to some of the activities that we may see coming next year?
Well, like I said, it's still a work in progress. Definitely on the coastal side of things, trying to identify some spots so we can get some native Bahamian plants planted, any kind of removal activities of invasive plants kind of done, but also education and awareness platforms. So most definitely you should see some panel talks coming out of the grass blooming. And anything else, well, there's still just ideas that we're hoping to bring to fruition. So, like I said, just stay tuned, watch the site as we have different announcements come up. But I'm very excited to get more into the hands-on kind of side of it and hopefully to bring more persons on board. So we have a lot of revolving hands to ensure that we are making an impact, we are being seen and heard. Because not just from my point of view as climate change and the environment, but one, from my point of view, being a woman, but also two, being a representative of the youth. And so just ensuring that we have the youth understanding that yes, climate change is real. Yes, it might be a bit gloomy, but you can also have some hope because these are some efforts that you can take and you can contribute to by being a part of them.
Mhm.
So just ensuring that there's some level of empowerment there, but also providing the youth with the skill sets and the education and awareness that this is where we're at, this is where we need to go, and you are the next generation to come. So come on board.
Right. I know what you said was so important. I'm so inspired by the youth, and I'm not that old, but clearly not in my 20s anymore. But I'm so inspired by so many 20-year-olds that I'm meeting that are actually taking up the charge and they're studying the degrees, they're doing the work, they're like you creating these groups and coming together and finding ways to help continue to mitigate but also adapt our country for climate change. I mean, it's an unfortunate problem that people kind of saw coming, but no one's really paying attention to. And I've had younger kids who are like still in high school say, "That's y'all generation fault." And I had to tell them, well, actually, not my generation, but like two generations before me. Because with innovation and with the big boom and all these other things, it's great to see more youth are getting involved and becoming aware. And even if you're not someone who is a climate scientist or an environmentalist, there's so many ways you can still be involved. It is an interdisciplinary area, and it's something that affects every single person in this country on this planet. And while we talk about that, I am interested in hearing who is someone in the sector, whether they're local or international, that inspires you and why.
Oh, I love this question. So
You sound
growing
like a real sound.
growing up, I've always had two very strong environmental presence that I guess I've really taken after. I've always looked up to them. One is on the call, Mr. Eric Carey, who was the past president of the Bahamas National Trust for X amount of years, but also Eleanor Phillips, who was a part of the Nature Conservancy for a very long time as well. And they both showed, I thought, strong leadership in the environmental field for a very long time, and they gave the environment a voice, especially when others didn't want to believe or hear what was being said about, we're a developing country, but that does not mean we should not develop sustainably, because we need to ensure that we're developing correctly in a way that is preserving our land for future generations again, but
Mhm.
also so that we are maintaining our groundwater ecosystems. We're preserving our mangrove forests and our coastal forests as these things are happening, and just ensuring that these persons have been around long enough step by step to ensure that at least we still have some life in this country. It's able to pass the baton onto persons like me and you, and then persons after me and you, so that we can ensure that, well, they have done their job, they've done a great job at that, and now we can continue on from what they've done as the foundation, as well as with a blueprint of the direction that we need to go in. And I just absolutely love and adore them both, especially for all of their work and efforts towards the environmental field. And there's so many others as well.
I know it's a long list, but
A
I
lot.
like that you highlighted those two because I think something else that I've noticed about them, because I also admire them as well, is they're also so willing to help. I think a
Yeah.
lot of times we hear in different sectors that, oh, people want to hold on to information because they want to remain valid or relevant. I love that our community, the beings and people like Eric and Eleanor have created a pathway for youth. Like it wasn't just like they care about their career and they're trailblazing for themselves. They've really, created a path that continues to widen and more people are coming behind them. And I'm so excited, like I said, to see the ripple effect from that. There are two stones out of many that got dropped in the water and the ripples are showing. And you're not the first person to credit them. And I'm happy that you did. So thank you. And
Thank
thank them. And last but not least, I wonder if there's maybe a nice final thought you want to share with our viewers, whether it be your favorite mantra, a quote you live by, or a cute story about a lesson learned that you've carried with you for the rest of your life that you want to share to viewers who are listening right now and later on in the podcast.
So there was one thing I wanted to touch on that you mentioned earlier,
Sure,
and then
please.
I said that, but you had mentioned just something about the youth and just being like, oh, that's because of your generation. What I would say to that is this is not the time to play the blame game. Like, we are on a time crunch. And regardless of how much time we have or who caused what, we all have to come together to ensure that we are making efforts and significant efforts at that in this urgent time towards ensuring that the Bahamas becomes more resilient and becomes more sustainable. And the one thing I would also tag along to that is as it relates to career wise and just in the country, ensuring that the youth are being included in these conversations, are being hired to jobs that they are qualified to work in and contribute to, because that is, I would say, a generational issue that we might see where some jobs are, like, well, I've been here the longest. And so, like, I'm not going to listen to you. No, you should listen to us because, like you say, like this is going to be your issue. And then they're saying, no, this is something that you caused. No, we all need to come together and we need to ensure that we're having feedback going back and forth and everybody's on the same equilibrium in a sense to ensure that we're facing these issues together and not just like tossing the torch. And I just wanted to say that. But in terms of a mantra, so I have this quote that I love from Mulan, the movie. And it says, the flower that blooms in adversity is the most beautiful and powerful of all. And I just absolutely love that because no matter what kind of challenge I face or anyone faces, I feel like it's okay to break barriers and to break stereotypes and to just do what you know in your heart is right. Like follow your own morals and just ensure that what you're doing has a reason. And even if it's something that other persons might look at you sideways for, or they're not fully in agreement with. Once you're doing what's right, you will always have like some kind of negative backlash, whether you're doing something right or wrong. You'll always have some kind of like, controversy around it. But once you're very strong and believe in yourself, I think go ahead with your message and continue to face the adversity.
I love that. And I think, and in doing that, you'll always find your tribe. I think that's something that's also, if I could add to your wonderful mantra. I love that quote. And I'm going to add that to my bucket of quotes now.
Yes.
Yeah. But thank you so much. I don't see any more questions in the chat. And I think this was an amazing episode. And I love that you kind of went back and touched on the youth comment because we did start this season with our youth ambassador, our youth climate ambassador, Lashanti Russell. And so it's nice that it kind of came full circle here with you. And I'm just so inspired. Every time I speak with Melissa, guys, I'm so inspired and I'm so grateful to have you in my tribe. And I'm so grateful that you were able to come on the show again today. And I hope to see you on many more episodes in the future. So thank you so much for taking the time out on your beautiful Sunday afternoon to come and join me on Siren Sundays.
Thank you so much for having me. I just mentioned to someone today, literally, that you, with this platform of Siren Sundays, have brought to life something that we were only imagining to happen. And so thank you as well for being a voice of the environmental community here in the Bahamas to ensure that, the different work that's happening, especially by different amazing professionals, is being heard.
Yeah, man, I'm just a megaphone. I'm just putting you guys out there. But again, so thank you so much to all of our viewers. Thank you for representing Bahamian environmentalists on a global level so beautifully as I steal Siren's words. And thank you to all our viewers who've been riding the wave with us all season, all 3 years, all 9 seasons, even if it's just been this season. Thank you so much for tuning in every Sunday to have a happy Siren Sundays with us. We hope to see you all next season in 2024. So happy holidays in advance. And thanks so much. All waves yours, Lashanti the Siren.